Denise.
Hi.
Hey,
I
how are
want
you?
to, I'm doing pretty good, thanks. I'm day by day. How's that? I'll take that. Thank you. Um, Listen, I want to ask if you hit your head, because I've had head injuries in the past.
Mhm.
If I hit my head, what's the best thing to put on and where? Like at the base of my
Helichrysum.
skull? Helichrysum.
Helichrysum topically on the spot, inhale it, and internally, I would probably go back to the galbanum and the black cumin. And then, maybe after 3 or 4 days, I'd even start taking a little bit of helichrysum um, internally. The only reason I don't do the helichrysum right off the bat with a head injury is that the helichrysum can really make the blood more fluid. And if there is a little bit of bleeding inside the head, we don't want to increase it. Topically, that shouldn't be an issue, but internally would make things a little more fluid and a little bit more like raise the potential. So I stay away from anything like lemon or helichrysum for about 3 days when the head gets hit. But like topically, I put that on right off the bat just to reduce the inflammation and things like that. And uh, the black cumin and galbanum together is very helpful. If it's a long-term injury, like where the injury is longer than like a week or two old, I go pretty heavy on helichrysum, but sometimes I'll start to use spike lavender, which is a little bit different than the other lavenders, although it smells kind of the same. It's helpful with cerebral spinal fluid circulation and regulating that, and it helps the brain to detoxify a bit. And if the cerebral spinal fluid is thrown off a little bit because of the injury, it helps to regulate that. And so then after that, I just do a little bit of or not self-evaluation, but evaluation and see what potentially is up. Because like sometimes with a head injury, there's kind of a sloshing of the brain, and there can be like some fascial lesions.
Oh,
Um, and so a couple ways to treat that. Again, black cumin, again, helichrysum, and in some more extreme cases, I use this is more like if it's like 30 days out, just because in the early stages you don't really need to bother with it. But
okay.
after 30 days, the use of MSM, and
Oh,
which is
really?
sulfur, and it can reduce black cumin and MSM both reduce internal like scars, you know, which is
Huh.
like a fascial lesion is what we're talking about in the brain, but it can be helpful for that. And then if there was poor blood supply for a little while, again, this is like, 30, 60 days out. I do, there's a mushroom called lion's mane that I would do like a pretty good size dosage of, like the equivalent of maybe about 6 capsules a day,
Well,
a few thousand milligrams, 2 to 3,000 milligrams a day. And it will help rehab the brain due to toxicity or exposure, which could just still be like, stagnant blood or lack of oxygen for a little bit. It can be helpful for that. And then sage just as the neuroprotective component for something long term.
well, muscle is kind of like, at least initially, like what I would do because I forget. If I get hit in the head, I really forget. So I'll make like an index card,
Mhm.
to go to it. And then I would try to get on the Q&A with you
Yeah.
after
So,
pretty quickly.
but do you bump your head a lot, or you hit your head a
I've
lot?
had, it's been a history of mine. I started getting some cranial sacral, and I think
Yeah,
that
tremendous.
although with my son and all, I had to kind of take the year off, but I just started it yesterday too. It was such a gentle touch, but it was so incredibly significant on my body.
Oh,
It
good.
works very, very well for me. And maybe if I do that, Greg, maybe I will be able to keep the head injuries a little more at bay, you know. But I've had some pretty, as they would call doozers. How's that?
Like I'm curious, like you hit your head, or was it a car accident, or
Well, the first
um
one, I was jumping on a bed. I fell backwards and cracked my head open when I was really
oh
young.
wow, that's a pretty
And then
serious.
a horse fell on top of me when I was 31. He helicoptered around, came down on and I had a significant head injury. I bled behind my left eye, you know, cracked a couple of ribs, had a temporary paralysis of my pelvis. So that was pretty, they said that I took that just short of permanent damage. Here at this house, I was doing some artwork and I stood right up into a chandelier and a spike went right into the top of my head.
Oh
So, you
yeah,
know, so I don't know,
that's
you know, like
crazy.
right at my, yeah. And then a couple of like sideways whiplashes with somebody that hit me on my fender, you know, and another
Yeah.
sideways type whiplash when I was probably a teenager. Oh, and then when I was young, I flipped over like one of those between the snack bars at a drive-in. I flipped
Mhm,
over my
mhm,
head off
mhm.
of one of those too. So
So you've
that's
had
what I mean.
several, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And
this is what I would say about that. Like when you've had like that many, like because you know the thing with head injuries is we think about it like when the head gets hit, but it can also be a head injury even when the body gets hit and jarred pretty substantially. That still will kind of slosh the brain a little bit. And so you know, it doesn't always have to be a blow to the head, you know. And then there's, you know, exposures to chemicals and things, which is still almost kind of a same version of that. And so one of the things that like I looked at, you know, this was many years ago, but I ran a study, like a research and development thing where we evaluated people who it was just head injuries. And I can't remember how many therapists I had under me, but we did it for like 10 or 11 months. And you know, it was all a case by case basis. We really had to go through and evaluate because each injury is different because of, you know, how the person hit or landed or, you know, what happened. But one thing that was uh, consistent, and it's actually funny that you're bringing this up because I was just finishing up the notes for the uh, energetics to the glands. And that's one of the things is that when the head gets traumatized like that, one of the things that it does is it throws off how the glands function. And how the glands function then start to affect like the prefrontal cortex, regardless of where the injury is at, it will start to affect the prefrontal cortex. And so the long-term treatment as far as like, you know, treating the fascia and the injury sites and, you know, the lesions and all that is what I said. But I would also look at like jump starting the glands, and you can use combinations of frankincense and myrrh. You can use frankincense by itself, myrrh by itself, and the other one that's a little bit of a sleeper in this area is patchouli. Patchouli is actually very good for jump starting the glands as well.
oh,
And the more that you jumpstart the glands, because you're not really trying to treat a specific gland, you're trying to stimulate all glandular activity. It
oh,
will actually change some of the areas that were traumatized by the impact. And
wow.
so I mean basically you're undoing some of the things that get thrown off by the impact. So it's not so much that you're treating the impact, you're treating the effects of the impact. And you know, that was one of the things like when I was young, you know, being riding a bike and everything. Let's just say there was a lot of head impacts. You know, I broke a lot of
Yeah.
helmets. And You know, at first, I don't know that I'd say, oh, I noticed anything. But when I started treating the glands, I was like, man, my head's clearer, I have more energy. There's just certain things that just function better. And my attention span got better. Like a whole bunch of things got better that I don't know that I even realized they were bad.
Yeah, you don't
But
know.
looking back, I was like, yeah, it started happening after I hit my head on the asphalt so many times. Like because there was about a 3 or 4 year period where it was a bunch. And looking back, I can tell the before and then the time and then afterwards. And like the afterwards, my brain was working so much better after the fact. So I mean, keep that in the mix of I don't know that lemon verbena would do it as much as doing the frankincense, the myrrh, the patchouli. Like you need to just like jumpstart the glands, not even really worried about treating a particular gland. You're just trying to get them to all step up their game a bit.
And would I do it on inhalation, internally?
Frankincense and myrrh or three wise men, you would take internal. Patchouli, I would put I mean, you can take a little bit of patchouli internally, but I don't find that it would work as well. Patchouli, I would inhale and put several drops on your wrist daily.
Okay.
Like probably 4 or 5 drops on the wrist and rub it together, and then like 30 inhalations or so on a daily basis. And you'll notice that over a period of time, your brain starts working better because the glands are working better.
Wow, that's great. And then how about the frankincense and myrrh? How would I take those? And you want me to take all
Well,
three?
you can actually just choose one. You don't have to do them all. But I would just choose like three wise men or the frankincense and myrrh blend would probably be the most potent. But if you went frankincense or myrrh or patchouli, just choose one thing, and you can just kind of go down that rabbit hole. You don't have to keep doing all of them. Just pick one and just start working it.
But that would be internal and on the rest.
Frankincense, myrrh, three wise men, any of those I would do internal. Like you could still do inhalations, but I would do them internal. The
Okay.
patchouli, just because patchouli works a little bit different, I would do that through inhalation and then topical.
Excellent. Thank
So
you.
whichever one you want to choose, like they'll all are effective for this. Just choose one of them and just go down that rabbit hole.
Thank you. That's great information. It's
yeah.
And for the internal, 2 to 3 drops daily, or
Yeah,
what do
2 to
you-
3 drops. But like if like if something is more significant, especially with the frankincense and myrrh, you could step it up a little bit. You could do 3 drops 2 or 3 times a day.
Okay.
Yeah.
good job.
Like if you're going to do more, maybe talk that out with me before you do it. But frankincense and myrrh, you can do bigger dosages and it's pretty okay.
Great. Thank you. This
Yeah,
is
you're
excellent information.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make up my cheat index card.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
guess
there you go.
Go back to
But like when you first get injured, like
oh, you're sad.
do the other things that we talked about, the first things we talked about. Yeah. Galbanum, black cumin, a little bit of helichrysum topically, and then after about 3 or 4 days, you can start doing helichrysum internal.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Those are the
You're-
key. Start there, and then I kind of would probably try to send an email or get on.
Yeah, let us know. Yeah.
Thank you.
And we'll get this edited and even maybe be able to be like, here's the cheat sheet. For everything. So
Thank you, Sam. That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Because like for me, even like when we were running that study, or like I say, it's a study, it was more research and development. I was including like blows to the face and blows to the jaw as
Wow.
part of, so like, that even expands on the parameters of what a head injury was. And then over a period of time, you see with the football injuries that it wasn't always a blow to the head. It was people like driving their shoulder into somebody's rib cage, or knocking their feet off from under them, or it didn't always have to be a blow to the head. And so, yeah, like it can look a lot of different ways. And so the brain is not tough in that way like other parts of our body. So like sometimes you just got to give it a little TLC for a while. And so that's why even the lion's mane is helpful for the brain itself, but that won't really touch the glands. But like if there's been like chemical exposures or periods of time where there's been lack of oxygen or something of that nature, then like excessive amounts of inflammation in the body, lion's mane can help rehab the brain a bit. But still with a head injury, like I go full throttle on the glands, like
Okay.
for chronic injuries, like full throttle. Chronic is anything that is older than 30 days. Like,
Sure.
like chronic, sometimes we think of like, oh, it's a problem that won't go away. It's just something that's older than 30 days. So under 30 days is considered acute. Older than 30 days is chronic. And so sometimes you start treating something differently, after that 30-day mark.
When the horse fell on me, the internist, and at that time they didn't have MRIs. It was just a CAT scan. I was up in Canada and they actually didn't have any equipment. So I had to wait till I got back into Seattle. So they put dye in my system, and the neurologist said I took it just short of permanent damage. And I remember my internist saying, don't even expect to be right for at least 6 months.
Yeah.
But I remember, and I didn't. I waited. I was so patient. And then at 6 months, I went in and I was like, I am still not right. And he says, yeah, it's kind of a bummer. Well, at that time, they didn't have all that much knowledge, too.
They really didn't. Like even now, it's better, but it's not. It's the brain is very complicated. Like it's just there's so many factors. There's just, and really you just have to get in. And I mean, I think that's where what we would call functional medicine or holistic medicine, with somebody who kind of knows what they're doing, can sometimes even produce like better results, because it's not really like Western medicine sees it as like there's a condition, like it's a definable condition, where sometimes it's not that it's a condition, it's just the function's off. And medications don't always make like a function better unless it's like very specifically become a health issue, something that's like diagnosable. And so when you're in that gray area, like what do you do? And I always have them go through and do all the things with Western medicine, because there's areas where they really shine. But then when you start to get in those weird like functional areas, you just got to start nursing parts of your physiology back to health. And so the big one for things with head is endocrine function.
Yeah, that would certainly make sense. It was almost 2 years, I think, before I really, but my son said, we had gone on a vacation, and you know how kids will say something out of the blue. And I remember he said to his father, look, Dad, we got Mom back.
Oh,
I know. I was like, oh my gosh, I hadn't realized I was even gone. Yeah, it was really good. So yeah, it was. Thank you. I really appreciate this, Greg.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Okay, keep us posted if we need to make adjustments or something, but that's a good straightforward approach.
And then for the spike lavender, is that just inhalation?
Yeah, inhalation, and I mean, you could put it on the wrist, but I like inhalations with spike lavender, and then salt baths, like for rehabbing the cerebral spinal fluid and regulating that. You could also use it in like massages and lotion, and then I mean, the cerebral spinal fluid, here we're talking about like physical things, but even you can keep refining the cerebral spinal fluid circulation to a very high degree, and for more mystical practices and things, you would do it with acacia. acacia. But like that would be for a deeper regulation of the sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight flight response. But it's good to kind of do steps up to that before you jump into doing that. It's not that you'll cause harm, it's just much more effective to kind of do, like, you treat it, and then you treat it for the stress response, and then you kind of treat the accelerator nerve, and then you keep kind of treating it up until it gets calmer, and then you start treating it with the acacia and things for potential for deeper experiences. But that's for another day,
Next.
or not. Like, if you want to talk about it, we can talk about it. But usually I geek out and go way too off on a tangent, so
And then we'll start, go ahead.